Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're so excited that you could all join us. My name is Judy Browse and I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and we're the professional association for environmental education in North America, and we're all about advancing environmental literacy and civic engagement. And we're really excited to be doing our webinar series in conjunction with our NAAE affiliate members. We have 53 state, provincial, and regional affiliates across North America, and we're really happy to do this series in partnership with all our partners across North America. Today's webinar is all about creating a more diverse and inclusive movement. And the title for today is Building a Successful 21st Century EE Movement, Accelerating Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And today's webinar is part of our ongoing webinar series. We're trying to hold a webinar every month at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of the month. We're trying to present really important and cutting-edge info that can benefit all of us working in this field and bring really exciting speakers and thinkers to the stage to talk about important issues in the field. And next month, we're going to have Kristen Grimm, who will be speaking about environmental education and strategic communications. In fact, she's going to be not next month, August 31st, coming up very soon. So we're very excited about that. And I also want to thank Kristen Kunkel, who's been helping to lead this webinar series and has also helping us with all the technology issues. So thank you so much, Kristen, for all that you're doing. And I'm very excited about today's webinar because the topic and our panelists and moderator is so important to the field. We know how important it is to accelerate our work to create a more diverse and inclusive movement. And without focusing on how we can do this work, we will not have a successful movement or field. We're making great progress. We have so much more we can do. And we couldn't have a more experienced and talented panel to help us think through what we can do to move the bar forward. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Daryl, who is the moderator for today's session. I've had the pleasure of working with Daryl since I started at NAAE. We've both worked at Audubon in the past, and we couldn't have a more skilled and thoughtful moderator for today's session. Just a little bit about Daryl before we dig in. He currently serves as the education coordinator for the West Basin Municipal Water District, a local government agency providing water to more than 1 million people in the coastal LA area. He earned his BS degree in environmental education from Humboldt State University and has more than 30 years of environmental education development and fundraising experience with local, state, and national environmental education organizations. He actually helped establish the Hawaii Environmental Ed Association. He served as a steering committee member for the Golden State Environmental Education Consortium. He's a board member of the California Environmental Education Foundation, and he is one of the current Diversity and Inclusion EE Pro moderators for the North American Association for Environmental Education. Daryl's passion is strengthening the communication networks and available resources for urban EE organizations, and his efforts have included expanding the community outreach for an EE grants program to diverse populations for Save the Redwoods League, building the first LA Urban Nature Center for the National Audubon Society, and creating an urban environmental education training program for urban young adults from the West Basin Municipal Water District. And he's been a wonderful supporter of NAAE, and so we're thrilled to have you, Daryl. And take it away and introduce our amazing panelists.
Thank you, Judy, and it's really my honor to be here with our distinguished guests because they have done so much to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within the field of environmental education. Let me just go ahead and introduce Marcelo Bonta. He currently is employed by the Maya Memorial Trust as the Philanthropy Northwestern Momentum Fellow in the Healthy Environmental Programs. His focus is really in diversifying the efforts within the funding community. He is the founder of the Center for Diversity and the Environment and the founder for the Environmental Professionals of Color. His visionary article that he wrote with Charles Jordan in 2008 entitled Diversifying the American Environmental Movement addressed really how this change could and should happen. Can you give a shout out, Marcelo? That's you.
Hi. You want me to say anything else?
All right, thanks. And then I also like to introduce Audrey Peterman. She's the president and co-founder of Earthwise Productions, an environmental consulting firm and publishing company that really focuses on connecting the national parks with the national park system with the people who they are really intended to get out and enjoy the great outdoors. She's also the founder of the National Parks Conservation Association and a really prolific writer on encouraging people to enjoy the environment. Audrey, you want to wave your hand and give out a shout? And as you can see from her background, she's in her RV, I take it, right now. Huh?
I think it's her boat.
Is that your boat, Audrey?
Yes, I'm on my boat. I'm really not very official looking, but I'm certainly enjoying the environment.
Oh, great. Keep track of where you are. And then we have another distinguished panelist, Stephen Moss. He's an environmental scientist and educator that engages businesses, schools, and nonprofit organizations with the faith community. He's the founder and principal of Solomon's Minds, which develops EE curriculum and sustainability and offers lots of consultation services for those that are interested. He's the department chair and professor of environmental sciences at Lincoln College of Technology in Marietta, Georgia. And I thought it was pretty fascinating that he has a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biology with a minor in religious studies from Lee University and a master's degree in science from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. So you want to give a shout out, Stefan?
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Again, thank you for joining us and sharing the insights and experience that you have with all of our viewers. I think one of the most talked about issues when we first introduced the concept of where diversity and equity and inclusion is within the field of environmental education is why isn't it happening at a faster rate? I think lots of us would say it's long overdue, but it just seems to be creeping along as an effort within our field. And many people, as myself, often justify this slow movement as it takes a long time to actually be introspective, to understand who an individual is in relationship to the surrounding communities and the ethnic, racial, social, economic influences that surround us. So we need to explore who we are and come to a real safe space to be able to talk about differences. But Audrey, in our previous conversations, has really push back on that idea, and that says that it's quite easy and it's long overdue, and there are really simple ways of advancing this effort. Audrey, do you want to speak more on that?
Absolutely. So 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Secretary Jewell and some of her top staff at the Department of Interior as part of the Next 100 coalition of diverse leaders from around the country who are pushing for President Obama to issue a presidential memo on the occasion of the Park Service's 100th anniversary, putting forth a vision of how to increase the diversity in the whole environmental conversation and also in national parks. And I said to her, you know, this is not rocket science, although so many people treat diversity as if it's rocket science. And I said I would never use the word T-I-R-E-D to describe myself. I would never even pronounce it. But truly, after 21 years of striving to do this work and repeatedly hearing the pushback about how difficult it is from the people who express an interest in wanting to engage with non-white communities, I'm like, it's almost as though that is a cottage industry in itself for people to say how difficult it is. And so today I'd like to reaffirm how, by engaging with people who are on the ground, boots on the ground, people like myself and Marcelo and Stefan and others who are in communities doing this work, we can exponentially expand the number of people that we touch and engage rather than taking it from the 30-foot level, we can be like on the ground with the people doing this work, who have friends in the community, who have influence in the community, and who are able to connect with the people, considering that at this point in time, there's nothing more important than the environment, as we can see with floods in Louisiana and Texas and fires in the West. There's nothing more important now than the environmental conversation and environmental education.
Thanks. Marcelo or Stefan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit, some nuances to that answer. Thank you, Audrey. I think on one hand, I totally agree with Audrey. You don't need to wait for resources. You don't need to wait for anything. It just depends on you as an individual working in your organization as a leader in this movement to get going and get started. It's real easy to just commit. Let's say right now I want to commit myself. And what does that mean? That means connecting to people like Audrey, like to Stefan, to people who have been doing this work for a while. Start educating yourself, start going to training, starting to understand what does this diversity, equity, inclusion mean for me in my world. That's a part that's, I'll agree with Audrey, it's easy. If it's a priority for you, you'll make time to do it. I'd like to also add a second piece to that, and so when we're talking about actual change within organizations, which within a lot of federal government agencies as well as our large green group, I think on an individual level, change can happen more quickly, and that takes just individual commitment. That's easy to control for me. I can control whether I'm individually going to be committed or not to this. When it comes to starting to shift the organization as a whole and start shifting structures and systems within the organization to continue to support diversity, equity, inclusion, that'll take a little bit more thought and a little bit more time to get to. But to get started on this process, I totally agree with Audrey. It's really easy. And if, Audrey, you've been doing this work for 21 years, and you were a person I looked up to when I started to do this work because you've been doing it for a while. It saddens me to hear, you've been working this for 21 years and we haven't made much progress. I would say maybe in the last few years, in my experience, I've been doing this work for 16 years, maybe the past 2 or 3 years, I think with a lot of efforts like the Diverse Environmental Leader Speakers Bureau, Green 2.0, the Center for Diversity in the Environment, Iantha Gant-Wright continuing to do her work. A lot of things are coming together, and I think we've had a big, some exponential progress in the last 2 or 3 years, and we need to continue to expand that and connect with all those people who are wondering why they want to do this, they think it's hard. Just get connected to the right people and the right networks first, and then we can get going.
And I think that you brought up a good point, Marcelo, is that just get started and connect to the right people. I think oftentimes, and if we're talking about our white friends who want to go ahead and tackle this type of work, they feel that they have to do it all, and they have to be culturally aware and politically correct. Is there anything that the three of you will recommend as far as how to get started and make that first effort working with communities other than themselves?
Well, let me just say, everything that Audrey and Marcelo said so far has been so true. And, the importance of connecting with the right people. But also, too, it's not okay to start something yourself in your own community if you see the need. I mean, there's no textbook that says you can't begin a movement. I mean, many movements that we've seen over the last have taken place simply because people got tired of the status quo and got tired of business as usual, and were willing to pick it up and say, hey, here's what I'm going to do with the skill sets and talents that I have, and whatever happens will happen, but I'm not going to wait for someone to come in and tell me what I feel needs to be done in my community. I'm just going to go ahead and get started doing what I know is right for the people that I see every day who need to have just as much information and education about what's going on in the environment as anybody else. So a part of it, too, is developing your own passion, I feel, and your own urge to want to make the difference that needs to be made in your community.
I think also that lots of our colleagues don't realize is that there are already groups out there in communities of color that are doing similar work. It's just not considered environmental education. It's environmental justice or social justice. If we go ahead and identify who those stakeholders are, they already are lined up and they have their own networks and they're doing great work. It's just bringing them into the fold and expanding and leveraging everybody's mutual resources. To that point, all of you have been invited to participate in this panel because you've all done some significant work out there over the past years. I would love for each one of you to take a turn sharing what you feel has been your most significant contribution to date to serve as role models for the rest of us, and maybe we can take a look at possibly replicating that within our own communities and with our own efforts. Audrey, do you mind starting off?
I would love to. Oh, and by the way, Marcelo, I would never say that I've not had an effect, because truly I see that the expanding network of non-white advocates for the parks, the environment, and public lands around the country is partially a result of the groundwork that we've done. However, I have become aware very recently of a very pernicious perspective that I think is part of what is holding us back. And that is, I recently read a study that was conducted with members of the Park Service, almost 1/3 of the Park Service staff in 2012, to gauge the agency's level of readiness for to become more diverse and inclusive. And people in the agency actually stated that they view diversity as being synonymous with unqualified. Did you get that? Diverse and unqualified are considered to be synonymous. And I have to say, I think that that is part of the root of the problem. Now, I'm not suggesting that people in the environmental education arena necessarily feel that way, but I think we have to investigate our feelings about who belongs where and recognize that everybody is capable of doing amazing things, and that all ethnic groups have an ethos. Just as human beings, we have an ethos, an ethic that speaks to us to be caretakers of creation. And in the public domain of national parks and the public land system, many non-white people, people of African descent, people of Asian, Native, and Hispanic descent, have made tremendous contributions to the development of our country and the protection of our environment. So I think that one of the first things that we must do is investigate our feelings about who belongs and who is capable of doing what, and recognize that everybody is equally capable of, given the right opportunities.
So Audrey, go ahead and share how you actually implemented that idea. What is one of the programs that you actually participated in that got people of color into the national parks, for example?
Well, you know, I could refer to the Diverse Environmental Leaders, where we have 50 speakers and many more asking to come on, who are people who have done amazing things like environmental education, who are climate experts, who are sailors, who are mountaineers, who are green energy experts. You know, we have an amalgam of that kind of talent. So while I might refer to one program, for example, Angelou Ezelo's Green and Youth Foundation out of Atlanta, which is preparing multiple young, diverse leaders to take their place, their rightful place in stewardship of the environment. There's also RUMAP's Outdoor Afro, Teresa Baker's African American in the Outdoors efforts out of Richmond, California, Nadine Patrice's Operation Green Leaves out of Miami, you know, Stephen Moss's Solomon's Mines out of Atlanta, Marcelo Bonta's Center for Diversity and the Environment. My point is, there are multiple programs and multiple leaders who are already way qualified and way out front in leadership. And if we are able to connect with them I think that probably one of the pieces I most want to emphasize is that a lot of times these entities at the grassroots level are really not able to build capacity because of the lack of funding. So one useful thing that, predominantly white communities and entities can offer is the partnership that includes money that helps support our efforts, so that then it creates a gestalt where we all rise and expand together.
Great, thank you for that, Audrey. And I think that if I summarize in a nutshell, what you're really emphasizing is leveraging the available community resources that are out there within the communities of color, because they have lots of knowledge, they have their own networks, and they have their own experience that they can bring to the table. And your segue into the financial part would be perfect for Marcelo to take on. If you wouldn't mind speaking about your efforts, Marcelo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, kind of bringing together Stefan and Audrey's comments about, all these people, all these organizations that Audrey named were people, like Stefan mentioned, that felt something needed to happen. They saw a gap in their community, see a gap in the environmental community and in the community of color, and they figure they can step into that space with passion and commitment and effort. And what you're seeing is, and what Audrey also mentioned, is that we are finding this progress because there's so many of those organizations that are out there. I would also like to mention there's been this trend that I've seen in the last few years of a lot of racial justice organizations stepping into the environmental space, environmental justice, climate justice, conservation, because they see it as a value and a benefit for the community that they're advocating for. So we see organizations in different places connecting with these new emerging communities. I guess if you're one hand you could think of it that way, but these are communities that have been here all the time, engaging and connecting to the environment. So I just want to mention quickly my story of, I was the only person of color at a national conservation organization in the early 2000s, and I felt that, why am I the only person of color in this national conservation staff? And I found that over time, as I met other people of color in the movement, that many of us were also the only or the few in our organizations. And as I continue to have these conversations with environmental leaders, people of color, white people, there just seemed like a huge need, as you would expect, to do this work. So with my relationship with Charles Jordan, and I wrote that article I mentioned earlier, I was actually trying to recruit other people to start an organization that could help with the capacity building around diversity, equity, inclusion in environmental organizations. And one thing led to another. One person I asked to start, and I wanted to support it, he just turned the question back on me and said, why don't you start it, and I'll support you. And I had no experience running an organization. I was never an executive staff level person. I never fundraised before. I never looked at a financial statement before. All these things were new, but what I knew was true to me was something needed to happen, and I felt there was something pulling me in that direction. And one thing led to another, is that I learned as I was doing the work, and that has led me. So I started the Center for Diversity in the Environment and the Environmental Professionals of Color to really fit a need that I was hearing out there. And once I stepped down from the executive director position at the Center for Diversity in the Environment about 1.5 years ago, I started thinking really seriously, what should I do next? And where is there a real need still in the environmental movement? And what kept on coming to me was the funding, philanthropy, grant making, the influence that grant making can have in the direction of our environmental movement. And for so many years, I have heard, not just from environmental organizations, but especially also from environmental funders who are saying, we need a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environmental movement. However, their grant making did not match what they were trying to say. So an opportunity came to work where I'm at now at an Oregon-based foundation called Meyer Memorial Trust. They just started an environmental program, and with equity as its foundation, we as an organization here have been doing this work for the past 4 years on our own equity journey, creating an equitable organization as well as expanding into our grant making. And what I'm finding is once you know, for a foundation and the role we can play, the shift, even like a few thousands for us, a few $1 million, can really provide the direction that we need to go as a movement. So we give funding to organizations who want to do trainings, who want to build internal capacity, who want to diversify and reach out and work with communities of color in their programming. And you know what's really satisfying about that is we're not only talking about it here as a foundation, but we're walking the talk. And we're really committed to trying to figure out how to do this. But through this process, we're 40 people staff, and we're half people of color now. And so we have voices of people from the community in this organization that are helping make decisions that are crucial to communities of color, our broader society. For me, in the environmental program, really making key decisions that's going to create a diverse, equitable, inclusive environmental movement that's going to be successful in this 21st century.
Thank you for sharing that, Marcelo. Stefan, how about you? What would you like to add, and what program or effort would you like to describe as your most significant contribution today?
So I just want to start just sharing a bit of my story. As an environmental scientist for years, I would attend conferences and meetings, and as usual, I would typically be one of maybe two persons of color in the room, and I would always have people kind of give me the funny look, like are you an expert in this field? They kind of, what are you doing here? And fortunately, I had a professor that took me under his wing during grad school and really built confidence. I moved from the Bahamas, on a permanent basis, not too long after I started, grad school. So, becoming an American, if you will, in terms of the cultural adaptation was a bit of a challenge for me. And then also attending conferences as a scientist and not seeing people, there that kind of look like me, there were a lot of questions that I had. Where are the people of color that are interested in these environmental affairs and want to be a part of the change? And everywhere I looked, it was really a challenge to find that group. So I worked in consulting for a few years and decided around 2009 that I would take a career in education, partly because I wanted to see more folks that look like me in STEM fields. And so as an environmental scientist and now educator in the classroom, for the last 7 years, I've been able to pass on these important environmental concepts to my students. And thankfully, I've been able to do that in an environment that's very diverse. I've been teaching at Lincoln College for several years and now at Georgia State. And in both colleges, there's a really good platform for diversity. 40 to 45% of the students are of color. And so it's become a mission for me to make sure that folks that look like me are pushed to pursue careers in STEM. And ultimately, everything that we're doing here in terms of getting people involved in the national parks, getting people involved in organizations, getting people to fund the work that's being done, people have to learn about why these issues are important, and that's where the education comes in. So if people aren't aware or they're ignorant of these important issues, they may not know why it's so important to put money behind it. They may not know why, for example, the national park is so very important to us when you have folks with a lot of money that are putting together studies and plans to turn our national parks into just another development. And so as an educator, I started Solomon's Mines as a way to reach out beyond my own classroom work to the wider community and to offer my services in environmental consulting, because I work in environments where, as a scientist, I did a lot of work for Shell, BP, many other petrochemical organizations, and unfortunately, I would often come to these sites that have been contaminated after the fact. And it was important to me that I worked, first of all, individually as a solutionaire to prevent these issues from happening in the future. Education gave me a platform to do that. And so, in communities of color, to specifically in my classroom, many of my students, live on the south side of town. They have issues. They want to learn about the landfill by their house. They want to learn about why it seems as if, all of the chemical manufacturing companies and facilities and industrial works are in their backyard. And they don't know how to articulate how they feel, but they know something's not right about that. So I'm very much at the intersection of environmental justice in that regard, with the education. And also, too, I've been working quite a bit in the faith community. As someone who's been involved in the faith community for many years, I've also been very surprised at how in many areas the faith community hasn't really engaged the scientific aspect of the environmental work. So, there's a lot of talk of, well, we want to support the environment. We know stewardship is important. We know that we should care for God's creation. Okay, so what scientific tools do you have to do that? And I didn't see a bridge, at least in my local community. There was no scientist that can step into a mosque or a church or ministry building and say, well, here are the scientific tools that you need to be able to answer the question clearly and articulately to your congregation, and give them tools that they can then use to support an organization like Sierra Club or CNC or Outdoor Afro or any other environmental group that was doing anything environmental at all. And so a part of Solomon's Mind's mission as well is to be that bridge between the faith community and the scientific community to provide those services where if a reverend or a minister would like to know, okay, what is the latest science? How can I intelligently and articulately explain climate change to my congregation in a way that they can understand the need to act? I want to be that person that goes in to this community, which in many cases is underrepresented, at least in the environmental discussion in some ways. How do I get the church to be involved in being a part of the solution? So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years.
No, thank you for that, Stefan. Do you mind sharing just a little bit more about connecting with this community, the religious community, which lots of efforts don't embrace? What kind of challenges do you have working with them, and how did you actually overcome those challenges, if there were any?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Dan?
Can you describe more of your effort working with the faith community? Who they are, what steps that you're involved to reach out to them and provide some of the scientific background that they could incorporate into their sermons, for example?
Sure. Well, one school in particular that I've worked with in the Metro Atlanta area, Praise Academy, the K-12 school. They are a faith-based school, and a lot of the educators there are very passionate about getting their students involved in social issues. And so I wrote a grant with the Environmental Education Alliance of Georgia to build outdoor stations for the students so that they can get outdoors and learn about nature in a way that matches or mirrors their faith base. A lot of times people don't want to get involved in science because there's this perception that somehow if you're involved in science, then somehow you're turning your back on the faith. And that's just not the reality of what stewardship gives us. Stewardship says, look, no matter who you are, no matter what's your faith background, many of your faith traditions really encourage you to be good stewards. So all I'm saying as an environmental scientist is that here are the tools that you can use to be a good steward. So we wrote the grant, we got it, and we constructed those stations. Students were able to get outdoors, to learn about nature, to apply the concept of the natural world, to the classroom. And also the teachers were able to take those lessons and make those life lessons. And so there's a big precedent for taking nature and using nature to teach life lessons. You think of Solomon, for example, talking about going to the ant and considering how much the ant works and how in turn we should not be lazy in our work. So there were a lot of tie-ins there that teachers can take advantage of, all the while they're educating their students about the environment. So I take great pride in knowing that that bridge can be built between the science and faith communities. And if it takes someone out there that's a scientist that's willing to reach out a hand and say, hey, here are the tools that you need to be a good steward, I'm willing to do that.
Thanks. Audrey and Marcel, have you had similar experiences working with other communities that environmental organizations typically don't tend to work with? Maybe the business community, maybe some other large governmental organizations that you like to share some of the best practices?
Well, I'd say, we meet people where they are. For example, very recently we lived in Atlanta, and we wanted to engage members of the local black community with the public land system. But it was hard to talk up to them about, national parks, etc., when they really didn't know where the national parks were or what they were. So we organized trips to take people out to the Chattahoochee National Recreation Area. We took them whitewater rafting. We took them on nature hikes. In fact, we even had an archaeologist with the Forest Service come and lead trips through Midtown Atlanta, through the heart of the urban area, talking to people about the trees and why a particular tree, you could look at it and discern that it had been there for more than 200 years before development sprung up around it, based upon, at what point it started to branch. And that was even revealing for me, because now as I walk through a forest, I can tell what was in the area for a long time and what is relatively new. And people really enjoy that. And so while they might not connect to a deep science, a deep dive in science, being able to take them and expose them to that environmental arena and raise that environmental consciousness of being aware of where they are, where their water comes from, how the trees purify their air, etc., really build a strong constituency in support of the parks and the environment. And one thing that I also noticed, a couple of years ago we were in Grand Canyon, and some of the members of our group were of Latino heritage. And I remember this one young lady trying to tell the ranger, the park ranger, about how in her culture they used a particular bush. They boiled it and drank it to alleviate stomach aches. And he kind of just dismissed her as though she wasn't even saying anything, because, he did not know that to be true scientifically. But, culturally, her culture has been using this plant for hundreds of years to alleviate stomach ache. So my point is, everybody has something to contribute. Every place has something to contribute and can be part of the learning experience, depending upon how you envision it and who you are prepared to connect with, that can help meet the community where they are and really inspire a love and appreciation for their environment and a desire to learn more and to be proactive in supporting and protecting it.
Thank you for that, Audrey. Marcel, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of sharing an organizational process, kind of like the practical things, especially at Meyer Memorial Trust, to do this work. Does that sound in line of what your question was?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I would mention, I'm doing consulting as well as being a fellow at Meyer Memorial Trust, and so I'm entering this space as my consulting hat. But the place where I'm employed that pays me on a daily basis has done some great things around diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's great to be in a place, again, that's walking the talk and trying to figure this out. So some of the elements that started us on this journey was commitment from leadership. Our trustees, our president, were really committed to doing diversity, equity, inclusion work. They didn't know what it was going to look like, but they stepped into the space. One of the first things they did is they committed resources, made a line item budget for this work, hired an outside consultant, someone outside expertise that can help guide us through this process. And I would really encourage that if you're prioritizing this work to make a line item for this in your next year's budget if you don't have it, and get outside expertise, because internally you may have some people that are committed to this work. I mean, I was when I was in my last the organization I worked for over 10 years, about 15 years ago. But looking back on that, like I had a passion and commitment for it, but I didn't have the tools to know how to do the work. I didn't know how a change process happened. I didn't know how to inspire other staff members to do this work. And so I was limited in my work. So get someone. I mean, if you're gonna get brain surgery, hire a brain surgeon. You know,
but not a very commonly known one right now.
Yeah, a good one. Good. Yeah, make sure it's a good one. Reputation of success. You know, in some of this, so what we started off with was staff-wide training and board training. We took another look at our mission and vision. We changed it. We revised it. Our vision in Oregon is to create a flourishing and equitable Oregon, because we realized if we wanted a flourishing Oregon, we couldn't do that without doing equity. We couldn't do that without working with all of our communities. We created an equity statement. Why is it important for our organization to do this work? And those pieces have been so essential for me stepping into the space 3 years into the work, because there are documents, materials that the organization has committed to that can help me bring this light to this work. It's not just Marcelo making fuss over here in the corner. It's Marcelo as a staff member committed to doing equity work as we stated in our organizational mission and vision. I'm here as one who's going to commit to doing that work, and I'm going to push us to make sure we're following that. And some of the incredible results, you know, the one interesting thing is we started with equity. When you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, I always think it's this three-pronged approach that really leads to successful work. We started here at Meyer Memorial Trust with equity, and we thought about equity on, you know, as all of our communities in Oregon, how do we serve them? And it just led to, you know, a racially diverse staff. We're over 50%, or about 50% people of color. 4 of our 7 executive level staff are people of color. Our last 3 trustees were all people of color, so now we're 4 of 6 of our board of trustees are people of color. And it's also led to this, like, one thing I was amazed with when I stepped into space a year ago was this, what I call an inclusive culture. The inclusive culture here was pretty amazing to me, stepping in and just feeling really valued from the very beginning. And I felt I could bring my full self to this work, and my voice was uplifted, and people were following. You know, I'd make a suggestion in a meeting, and then someone implements it. I'm like, wow, that's how you value a voice, right? Is, wow, this person, no matter what level this person's coming in. I'm only here for 2 years, so I'm like temporary. I'm a fellow, and to hear my voice being valued from the very beginning was really, really important for me to step fully into this space. Now saying all that, I do want to let you know, and we're very vocal about this because we are asked to give presentations all the time, and it's a messy process. This is one of our main messages. We made mistakes, and it was messy, and you should expect that. Because this is new territory for us to go into. Anytime you go into any new territory, learning something new, in order to do better, you have to make mistakes, right? To innovate, you have to make mistakes. To succeed, you have to make mistakes. As someone mentioned, the TED Talk conference is a failure conference, because everybody mentions how they were so successful. They talk about all the mistakes they made to get to the point of succeeding. So saying that, I also want to mention that as you make your mistakes, a really piece of this work around diversity, equity, and inclusion is making sure you tend to the impact of this work. We are stepping and moving forward with great intention, We want to be the best organization doing diversity, equity, inclusion, but we're making mistakes. And when we make mistakes, people are hurt. And we have to step into that space and make sure we're tending to that impact, sharing with people like the empathy and the compassion and the humility part of this piece, part of this work, which I think has been, if there's any one thing I have learned the most over the last 15 years doing this work, is to continue to come in with humility, compassion, empathy, and curiosity. When I follow those 4 things, magic happens, like success happens. We're able to make breakthroughs that were often barriers to moving forward. Yeah, so it's been really great being in an organization that's practicing this, and I'm seeing the success, and I'm seeing the challenges of doing this work, and we still have a lot more work to do.
Wow, you guys never fail to blow me away. Thank you for sharing that, Marcelo. And I think that what you've done right now is just share really well what it takes to create organizational change. And then on the national level for our profession, NAAWE is doing a great job trying to, first of all, conduct webinars such as these, create a diversity, inclusion, and equity EE-Pro website, connecting with the Center for Diversity in developing a diversity and inclusion type of program elements for the upcoming conference. So we're expanding efforts on the national scale. And then what you just talked about is on the personal level, what it really takes to create personal change, the compassion, the ability, the willingness to be open to mistakes. Do Stefan or Audrey, do you have anything else that you'd like to add as far as the personal introspective growth that one should really approach when working with diversity issues?
I'm going to defer to Stefan since I had a moment.
Would you just repeat that question one more time for me, please?
Are there, and do you mind putting your microphone closer to your mouth so we can hear you, Stefan? Are there any,
yes, I'm right here.
any personal traits that you would like to add to what Marcelo has shared as far as helping individuals with their own diversity inclusion efforts? What personality traits or qualities do they need to embrace when working with diversity and inclusion efforts?
I would say, first of all, you have to have a passion for this work. This is not a work where, you're out here, trying to collect a check or anything like that. You have to be completely, burdened by the lack of diversity that you're seeing around you. And you have to be effervescent in your approach to getting out here and saying, hey, listen, if we want conservation to really work in this, if we want to have everybody's opinion represented and respected, then we have got to do everything it takes to get everybody to sit at the table. I mean, not being passionate about this work, you're going to burn out because there are a lot of roadblocks. There's a lot of time in between when you put your suggestions out there and when they're responded to. And I'm sure Ms. Audrey could speak on this. She's been doing this for quite a while. And so, passion. And the last thing that I would add is relatability. So many times, and I've heard almost in every environment that I've been, well-meaning people just don't know how to reach a hand out and to be relatable to the communities that they want to engage in. And it does take activity. It does take, an understanding of cultural nuance. And it does take research. You have to do your homework when you're approaching, a community that you're not used to approaching and knowing what to say and how to say it. But if you're passionate enough, you'll get over all of those hurdles, and people will be connected to your passion, and they'll know, just like you'll know, that look, we're all in this together. We're all trying to solve the same problem. Maybe we don't all come from the same background. I'm an immigrant from the Bahamas, right? I've only been here in the United States for the greater part of maybe 10 plus years. But my passion for seeing the national parks filled with every single type of person that you can name is no different from anybody else because I see why it's so important. And so if you're relatable and if you care about the future of conservation, if you care about seeing people aware of those important environmental issues, then join us. Then put that passion and relatability and those other skills that you have, put them to work and help us change the face of the outdoors and change the face of environmental education in America.
Right.
And I'd like to say that to encapsulate what both Marcelo and Stefan said, I really underscore the fact that we need to have a budget for diversity. We need to value it enough that we elevate it to the point where it's a line item in our budget. And then to take the mystery and the worry and the fear out of it, we have professional expertise. When you get a consultant is working for you, okay? So there's nothing to be afraid of. We can be your guide and shepherd you through the minefield. There's no need to rebuild the wheel from scratch because we know and have shared the same values as environmentalists. We're all environmentalists, you know? So we share that value, we share that passion, we have that expertise. So you can take all the work out of it and go straight to the speedway, because when you're allied with the people who already know how to do this, you don't even have to worry about, you can minimize the chance of errors because the people you're working with are working in the communities that you're trying to connect with. And so we've already worn out the bugs, you know? We've already worked those out. So you can depend upon our professional expertise to get you to where you want to go. It's very simple.
Thank you, Audrey, and Stefan and Marcelo. I know from my own experience, just making the effort to reach out and shake a hand is the first step in building bridges to any population that you're not familiar with. With that, I'm wondering if we should go ahead and hand it back over to Judy. Judy, would you like to wrap up and try to show your remainder slides? I don't know if she's even on anymore. Let's see. Share the screen.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, I was still on mute. I was trying not to make any noise here. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, but thank you all. What a great conversation, you guys. And I'm not sure. Let's see here if I can try this again. See if this works. I never know.
There you go.
Sorry, it's just not letting me. There we go. Can you see that?
Sure can.
Great, thank you. And so thank you all for that conversation. I do think there'll probably be a lot of questions that come from our members and supporters. And just wanted to say that, again, thanking all of you and look forward to continuing to work with you with our work at NAAE to move the bar forward on all of this. And Daryl, thanks for your leadership in helping us kind of figure that out, because it's not scary or mysterious, but it does take work and it takes money and it takes commitment. As all of you said, it takes passion. At our upcoming conference in October, we are going to do an all-day diversity and inclusion workshop. We have the National Coalition Building Institute doing a whole-day workshop. We have another half-day workshop on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Daryl knows, we've tried to incorporate at least 10 to 15 to more % of all sessions having to deal with diversity and inclusion. So we're very excited about that. And all the recordings of all our webinars are on EE Pro. We know that a lot of people share them. They not only share them amongst themselves, but also through university and formal school settings as well as informal settings, which is very exciting. And everybody can always go on the monthly webinar series on the learning site on EE Pro to find out more about our webinar series. And everybody can join one of the discussion groups, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, to have more conversations and to bring the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion into all the other conversations, whether it's about environmental education and technology or climate change or connecting people to nature, as you've all talked about. And you just need to log in using NAAE credentials. It's free. it's a service so that we can all connect with each other and learn from each other. And the conference is October 18th through the 22nd. We hope all of you will be there. Lots going on around this important issue and other important issues. And just to mention that our next webinar is actually on August 31st at 3 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time with Kristen Grimm, who's the founder and president of Spitfire Strategies. And she gave a keynote at the Baltimore conference, and I know so many of you enjoyed hearing her then. This will be a chance to actually get up close and personal and talk with her. And last month's webinar on collective impact from Dr. Nicole Ardwin is on EE Pro, so you can access it then. So if you have any other questions about the webinar series, feel free to contact me or Kristen, and I cannot thank all our panelists, and Daryl, what a great job of moderating. You guys are awesome, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you for all you do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy and team. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Kristen. Bye, everyone, and thank you.
Sure.
And if you guys want to hang on for a couple seconds, we can do a little debrief if you don't mind.